Thank you, everybody, for joining this session today. This conference today is organized by FMCE Africa, and our topic for this session is going to be the FM Standards Update International Best Practice for Aligning the Strategy with Business Strategy, ISO 41014, and developing our SLAs, ISO 41012. Our speaker for today is going to be the head of Academy for Facility Management, A4FM, and chairperson of the ISO SBS Technical Committee, that's TC 267 for Facility Management. Involved, Johan Eisel has been involved in FM education for over 2 decades, and he has participated as a subject matter expert on development of 4 ISO standards for facility management, as well as SANS 1752 as the strategic FM system standard. Without much of ado, because of the time that we have, Johan, kindly take it away.
The topic, as you guys know, we're going to talk about international best practice and the way FM standards are enabling us to align our FM strategy with the business strategy, and then secondly, how they enable us to develop service level agreements for our organizations, something that we all deal with and that most organizations have somewhat of a difficulty with to run through. Okay, so we've run through all of that stuff. We know what we're talking about. Before we get anywhere much faster, I just wanted to look at the list of standards that have been developed up until now, and you'll see the one for sourcing has been around for a while, and then the one for strategy was only adopted this year. So there are a number of standards that you people can use that are very helpful for running FM in the organization. So let's start out with what is FM strategy. In fact, what does it say? It says it's a statement expressing the analyzed need of the demand organization, proposing FM solutions and outlining a plan for implementation. I think just stand still there for a second, look at it again, look clearly what it says, the needs of the demand organization. It's important that we take note of that, the proposed solution, and the outline for implementation. Guys, I'm going to show you a number of slides, and I'm not going to read everything in the slides. I'm going to talk about those slides as they are up. So in the standard, most of the attention is focused on understanding the demand organization, and then secondly, on developing FM requirements. And then obviously there are the other elements that we will deal with. So I'm briefly going to chat about each one of those. So understanding the demand organization is a major part of the standard. It requires due diligence. Very important that we note that it is going to require a lot of work in order to get all of this information out and available. In practical terms, the core business strategy is concerned with how people in the demand organization make decisions and allocate resources to achieve business objectives and the planning required for these purposes. And clearly now, once we understand that, we can match FM with that. So this will be different for every organization, and I think that is very important for every demand organization. So a demand organization, in terms of the standard, is just your organization, the one that demands or requires FM services. In understanding the demand organization, we will have to look at the structure of the demand organization, its plans for its people currently and into the future, and how these things will impact FM services. We will have to look at the value systems and the organizational culture, and examples of those are to be found in organizational policies, the procedures that they implement, documents that set out their belief system, their attitudes, their behaviors, and so on within the organization. So all very important aspects to be aware of, looking at their governance, exactly how those decisions are made with the leadership. So what are the delegated authorities, roles and responsibilities, accountabilities, all of those things need to be understood before we can really properly understand the demand organization and therefore start the process of developing FM services for them. So you can hear that there is a lot of due diligence involved in this particular aspect of it. One of the reasons why it is so important is that the core business strategy of the organization, of the demand organization, is the foundation upon which the core business activities and objectives are built. And if we don't understand that, it becomes very difficult for us as FM to ensure that our own strategy and our service delivery is aligned at all times with the business strategy of the organization. And unless we understand the organization clearly, there's a very distinct possibility that we will dictate to the organization rather than deliver to the organization. All right, then moving on to developing the FM requirements. This is the most substantial part of the document. And this particular aspect deals with all of those issues that you see there. Again, it will be different for every organization, and I'm going to talk about them just very briefly. Once the demand organization's needs have been adequately understood and defined, like we've just looked at, it is possible to determine the most appropriate requirements for FM and facility services. The FM requirements can stem directly from the demand organization's needs, and as I said, should not then dictate those needs. Things that we need to look at in this particular regard are the physical assets and the space provided. We will need an updated asset register from the organization, how they utilize space and how that fits in with their functional requirements. All of those things will have to be looked at. We will have to consider a facility service review. So what policies, procedures, processes, and service delivery mechanisms are utilized by the organization, and the way we then need to look at it in developing the FM requirements. We should probably look at a resource audit to make sure that we understand exactly how these services are delivered and how people feel about those services in the organization. All right. I think we need to move on. When we talk about formulating the FM strategy, so once we have all of that information in place, we can start formulating the FM strategy. And the FM organization should prepare and maintain a formal document which summarizes the demand organization's need, against which FM requirements for its facilities are sufficiently detailed to enable policy to be defined and the FM operations to be planned, resourced, implemented safely, efficiently, and cost effectively. That's a mouthful, but that is what goes into this particular aspect. The budgetary requirements, so whether we're going to do only zero-based budgeting, whether we're doing multi-year budgeting, life cycle budgeting, all of that has to be considered here. How the procurement will work, how it fits in with the corporate requirements, and how we can best, from a facility perspective, fit in with that and comply with that, or maybe have to amend those in order to do proper procurement processes. Are all of the aspects that need to be considered. And then last but not least, in this particular section, the The FM organization should consider an implementation plan that incorporates all of the key elements of procurement, mobilization, training, induction, communication, performance management review, and the lessons learned, for getting the implementation of FM started in the organization. All right, then moving on to managing of performance, and I think I want to lay some special emphasis on this section of the standard, because if there is one problem in the environment that I function and the students that we train, it is about this particular issue, and that not enough attention is being paid to managing performance. So this standard lays quite a bit of emphasis on this particular aspect. Successful FM, including delivery of facility services, depends on performance that achieves predefined service levels and does so consistently. And I think that is the key message here. So performance indicators clearly need to be looked at. Exactly what are those performance indicators? How performance measurement should be carried out, and let me just catch my breath here for a second. What are included in those performance measures? Exactly what the process will be for measuring those performance, how they are reported, and eventually after reporting them, how are they then reviewed, what corrective actions are taken in order to ensure that we stay with the performance indicators that were developed, and therefore with the services that need to be provided from an FM perspective, and then clearly refocusing and learning from what has gone on. This standard will rely on a new standard that is coming up about performance measurement in its entirety. That is all that standard will deal with, performance management in FM, and therefore will have far more detailed information about exactly that should be done within the organization. Okay, the next element that we deal with is improving the outcomes. I think that is fairly simple. In other words, what has happened, how do we assess it, and how can we do that better? I think an important aspect here is that you see there the last element that is listed is updating the FM policy. Now that is also something that many organizations don't necessarily have, but you see that this standard is implying and is directing us towards that position where we will develop facility management policy to incorporate what has been done in the strategy. All right, I'm wrapping up with this section. So 41,014 enables alignment with the business strategy. It is not difficult, but it requires a lot of effort. Due diligence or diligence is very important here. It's a laborious process, but it is so valuable once it has been done that it is worth every aspect. It enhances the value add of FM to the demand organization. It improves client satisfaction, and it certainly improves funding. Okay, then we're moving on to the second part of our topic, and that is that would be service level agreements. So how do we use international best practice for developing service level agreements? The standard here is ISO 41012, which is guidance on strategic sourcing and the development of agreements. So it covers two issues. It covers sourcing, and it covers service level agreements. And we're certainly only going to cover service level agreements. So there's international best practice that is devised for due diligence and decision making for sourcing, which is the aspect that we're not going to cover today, but that is in this particular standard as well. So if you want to understand how to get to those decisions and what is required in order to develop a process that will enable you to make the best kind of decisions about sourcing, you'll find it there. This particular standard section that deals with SLA is very user-friendly, and it gives you a whole heap of recommendations with regards to service level agreements. Okay, so what is a service level agreement? It's a mechanism to create a common understanding, so the scope and the quality, between the demand organization and the service provider. Guys, we just need to stop there for a second because these words are very important. A common understanding. So there's no disagreement. We're not going to sit around the table and argue about what is written in the documents. We already understand that. Very important condition here about the scope and the quality. So it's not only about services, it's about the quality levels of those services. It enables effective communication to help management expectations, clarify roles, responsibilities, resolve conflict and discrepancies, and it provides an objective basis for measuring performance. I spoke about performance earlier when we looked at strategy, and here again, the whole focus on performance. And here the performance that they're talking about is related specifically to SLAs, and that again to me is maybe the most important part of this entire standard, and that is it gives us very clear guidelines with regards to performance measurement. I'll just check my time here. So further to that definition that is provided in the standard, it clearly indicates there may be one or more service level agreement for each service category depending on the complexity of the service. So a service level agreement, or at least then, if you've got one contract with a provider, at least there has to be specifications in terms of this standard for what goes on with cleaning, catering, security, building maintenance, and so on and so forth. So various service level agreements that can spell out all of the details, particularly with regards to performance, because the performance that I want to assess with regards to cleaning or catering or building maintenance are not necessarily done in the same way, and therefore one document may not address the issue satisfactorily. Okay, that enables us to then be able to change requirements and link it clearly to budgets, benchmarking, and also penalties. All right, so let's look at this particular agreement. And again, I'm going to just put the screen up quickly. I'm not going to mention everything. I'm going to talk briefly about every aspect given the time that we have available. But these are the main elements of the standard. So when we talk about the characteristics of an FMCE agreement, highlighted in the standard is the term, in other words, the duration of the standard, exactly when does it start, when does it end, what is that lag time at the end that allows you to transition to a new provider or change to in-house, or whatever it is that you're doing. In terms of subcontracting, which in our legal system would be referred to as cession or delegation. So clarity about subcontracting, who else is part of this agreement and who is not, and the extent to which they then subscribe to particularly service outcomes and quality levels. Allocation of management responsibility, so exactly what are those delegated levels of authority, who has the ability to make changes with regards to the service level agreement, and then the service levels themselves, and then we'll talk about that just now, and then termination of the contract. So clear provision in the document of exactly what takes place at the end of a contract period, particularly with regards to information and data and ownership of that data, regardless on whose hard drive it may sit or whose computer system it may resort. All right, and then the last element here are the agreement structures and the content that we need to look at. So this this particular aspect, so okay, we'll deal with that in a moment. So this deals with still with very legalistic, maybe not entirely facility management specific issues within the agreement. So common considerations within agreement, I think flexibility clearly is listed in the document, very important, because it enables us, or it advises us about how to phrase our document that it will survive the duration of the document, building in the necessary flexibility so that we can survive 5 years or 3 years of a particular contract without having to start over again. Then the performance criteria within this document, which is an important section that we're going to get to in a moment. I'll talk more in details about this. The information responsibility, so who needs to know what, when do they have to be informed, reporting and auditing procedures, I think is clear. Continuous improvement, so how do we define that? How do we move from where we are in terms of the experience with our agreement into something better? What is it that the demand organization learns, the users learn? How is it that their requirements change and adapt? And what is it that maybe changes in terms of technology, procedure, and so on out there in the marketplace that we can build into this document, keeping it flexible enough for that purpose. Asset replacement. So if this agreement requires some form of asset replacement, and it will, if it is a longer term agreement, then we also need to look at the project activity and therefore project management requirements for introducing those asset, the phasing out of assets and replacing of assets. Yeah, so let's think of a practical example. So you've got a provider that has provided all of your furnishings in your building, and after 2 or 3 years, they all need to be replaced. That whole changeover process, I think we all need to agree, is a clear performance management activity that falls into this particular category. Again, then the communication, how do we look at the communication? Very important part of any agreement. No agreement can be successful without mutual trust, and mutual trust is built on communication. So a very important aspect stressed here. All of the regulatory requirements for the demand organization and for the provider. So what are they? Build them into the service level agreement. And then there may be corporate standards that we need to take very careful note of with regards to a service level agreement. But a corporate standard may be something that in this particular organization, we do not accept build a maintenance backlogs. That's a corporate standard for a particular organization. Or we do not accept performance that doesn't get a 95% approval rating from the end users. So those things need to be built into the agreement. I'm going to not spend too much time on this, but I think it's important that you take note that the standard lists all of these issues in terms of preparing various phases for the implementation of the agreement. So it's not the agreement itself, but it's documentation around the agreement. Go look at it, make absolutely sure that you're aware of it. Okay, now we're getting to the core of this thing. There are 1 or 2 slides left and then we're done. So measuring of performance. So we absolutely need to make sure that our service level. Sorry, I couldn't. Is somebody speaking?
All right, yes, that is me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, okay. We are running out of time. If you can kindly just wrap it up in 2 seconds, because the other session is actually starting.
Okay. So this is the heart of the standard, and it looks at measuring effectiveness and outputs, guys. And there we say to you clearly that these things need to be done in the SMART principled way. They need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. And that is the heart of your service level agreement. Please make sure that you focus on that. It then goes into general clauses, and it goes into the specific service level agreement clauses that you certainly can look at. And so that is the end of our particular discussion and what this particular standard can do for you. Thank you. If there are any queries about this, please contact me. My details are up. Yes, we will be very happy to assist you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.